Welcome to another week, another show of Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. Momentarily, you'll see our good buddy Owen Siebring. Owen, of course, from Fox 28 and CBS 2 sports anchor there. Also, be sure to check out the Eye on the Hawks podcast with our good buddy, usually with Mitch Fick, the news anchor there. And Mitch has joined us on this program during football. Owen, of course, draws the basketball duty. Today, we're going to talk the whole show with Owen. First segment is going to be Hawkeye women's basketball. Then second segment, Hawkeye men's basketball. And the third segment, as far as we know, Owen had a long, extended interview with Cooper DeJean, the only one to do that. And Cooper, of course, as you know, coulda, shoulda, woulda, and was right near the top of the Super Bowl MVP, of course, the Northwest Iowa native, former Hawkeye All-American, and, of course, second-round pick of the Philadelphia Eagles in his rookie year. Owen had a nice sit-down with Cooper DeJean, and we're going to talk to Owen about that. So all that being said, as always, Owen, thanks for joining us. Great to see you. And how's everything going with you, my friend?
Fabulous. Staying busy here with basketball season.
Owen, Hawkeye women's basketball again. Yesterday morning's game at Ohio State, number 8th ranked, and overtime loss. But I'm telling you, Owen, to get there, they were down by 12 points in the last minute 20, and then Guyton hit the three. Now they're down 9, but 5 3-point plays in that period now for the long-term way. And then Affolter gets the old-fashioned 3-point play. And then Lucy Olson makes 2 free throws at the end to make it a 74-74 going into overtime. The Hawks started off the overtime with the Lucy Olson layup. Their first and only lead of the game, short-lived, and then they just got maybe put too much in to come back, but they lose 86-78. So let's talk about that game. You did a great job breaking it down on yesterday's Eye on the Hawks podcast, please.
Yeah, it was. It's one of those games that is kind of frustrating to see them lose, just because they do fight back so much and they're in it, and then you think, boy, after all that momentum that they built towards the end of the fourth quarter, that all right, surely they've got to pull this one off. And Ohio State just had a little bit more left in the tank. Foul trouble was an issue for them. Let's see who all fouled out. Kylie fouled out, Sid fouled out, and Hannah Stolke fouled out. That's not going to do you any favors. I was trying to think. I really would like to see the last time that the Hawkeyes had 3 players foul out in a single game. I don't know any stats on that, but that seemed like I just don't ever see more than 1 in a single game for the Hawkeyes. So it has to have been a few years since we've seen that happen.
The Hawkeye women will only have a UCLA game to play this upcoming Sunday, and then they finish out the season against a very tough Michigan team and then a not-so-tough Wisconsin team, but you don't want to take anybody for granted. So those 3 regular season games left, and the Big Ten tourney, and then, of course, the national tourney, which the Hawks right now, depending what service or poll you look at, Owen, you have them kind of like I do in that 8, 9, 10 spot, provided things play out the way they have, or what do you think?
That's what I'd imagine right now. If they manage to beat UCLA somehow, and they win their last 3 regular season games, then I think they'd have a good chance of getting, oh boy, I'd maybe have a hard time seeing them get up to a 6 seed with the amount of losses that are on their schedule or on their resume right now. But I think that if they were to win their 3 regular season games and win 2 to 3 games in the Big Ten tournament, I think that probably a 6 seed would be their absolute ceiling. And I would say that more realistically, you'd gauge somewhere between an 8 and a 10 seed, I think, is probably realistically what the Hawkeyes are looking at.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you there. I was nodding my head off camera going, yep, I think you're on point. You beat UCLA, that's going to jump you up. But what I really want to state on with this team is you've talked about all year long, as have I. This is a tough team to watch because they're so much better sometimes than they play. And they're trying to find roles, and I know Bill Parcells, the legendary Hall of Fame NFL coach, particularly with the Giants, has said, you are what your record says you are. But 18-8, 8-7 in the Big Ten. This team, just you look at shoulda, woulda, coulda, and yeah, they won a few games that you kind of scratch your head and go, phew, they got that one. But I can think of 4 or 5 games that stand out that they had that game. Yesterday, the bugaboo jumps up again. If you full court press this team, till they came out at halftime with some adjustments. Turnovers, missed free throws again, although Lucy Olson, I will say at the end of regulation, 75% shooter. She's way too good a shooter to only shoot 75%. She's got to get that up over 80, 85%. But especially towards the end of the season, but she made them both, to her credit, sent the game into overtime with about 2 seconds left. But Owen, those bugaboos jump up again, turnovers, especially when they're pressed full court.
Yeah, that's been tough. The press killed them yesterday early in the first half, and then free throws. You just still have to think that Jan just has to be pulling her hair out, thinking about all these missed free throws. That when you go to overtime, when you're tied, you're like, boy, again, just one, two made free throws here, there, somewhere throughout the game makes a big difference at that point. So those are killing them. I know that listening to Jan and Sid and Lucy talking after the game yesterday, they still do have to take some encouragement out of it. They still are hanging with an Ohio State team that's like, it's not like they're just like, oh, this is a pretty good Ohio State team. That's the number 8 team in the country. That's a team that has potentially Elite 8 or Final Four potential.
At their house, by the way, Owen, too, at Ohio State.
Exactly. Yes. Tough road environment, too. In front of a bunch of screaming middle school and elementary kids there in Columbus, Ohio, as well. So that was a tough road game for them that they were able to send it to overtime. But sometimes the selection committee doesn't always take that into consideration. They see a loss, and a loss is a loss. But at the same time, they are still encouraged by the way that they were able to fight back from being 12 down. Lucy, I think her stat line was that with a minute left in regulation, she had 12 points, and then she finishes with 27. She just played so great down the stretch, which is what we've talked about all year, that the team needed to find that person who could step up in the final minutes when the games really matter the most. And Lucy really has been that the last handful of games. She's been so great the last few weeks. Sydney has been fantastic the last few weeks. Every game, it seems like she's getting up into double-digit rebounds. Yesterday had 15. Seems like she's been at 14 or 15 rebounds nearly every game for the last month. So those two right now, you're getting everything that you want out of them. It's some of the other players are like, as long as they can maybe take that next step and keep developing a little bit better, just do one or two more things, then you've got a team that could win a couple games at the NCAA tournament.
Miss bunnies or short shots, and Janice talked about that a lot. I know they're expecting to get hit or fouled because it's the Big Ten and it's physical, but you got to make some of those shots. And yeah, it's great. The offense runs great, and they get those short and easier shots, but you got to close out on those. And the point about the press is Caitlin Clark ain't walking through that door anytime soon. And they had a one-person press break, of course, for the previous 4 years, and of course, clutch free throws down the stretch. But again, I still say to you, Owen, if this team can catch lightning in a bottle, and every team is saying this, of course, but you look at every game they are in, and just as you said, just tighten the screws on a few things, and you're there. And yeah, you mentioned Affolter is a double machine the last 3 or 4 games, and would expect that moving forward. And I thought you did a nice job as we close off this segment here talking about the Hawkeye women. Of course, UCLA coming to town, as we mentioned, for the big game this upcoming Sunday. Was formerly the number 1 team, now the number 3 or number 4 team, depending what poll you look at, but lost a close game to USC. But Owen, you talk about what happens, or you did on your Eye on the Hawks podcast. Again, check that out, folks. You'll see all Owen's information at the bottom of the screen where to find that Eye on the Hawks podcast. But you talked about projections. Good losses, bad losses. You mentioned the NCAA and yesterday's businessman special, as they call it, or business person special during the President's Day holiday. Students were packed in, and Ohio State was a full house, a raucous crowd, as you mentioned. But, this Hawkeye team has good standing as far as, I don't even like to use the word good loss, but we'll speak in NCAA vernacular here. Good losses, bad losses, quad 1 wins, quad 1 losses. Their resume still looks pretty solid, Owen.
Sure, you got to think so. Especially, and if nothing else, that USC game is one that a lot of people are going to look back at and see like, oh man, they did beat that USC team when they were on, what were they, on a 15-game winning streak, I think, when Iowa beat them. And so that's a good one. And then I'm always going to look back at those 2 road wins that they had at Minnesota and at Nebraska as like really key games for them, because it was a chance for them to prove what they had on the road, especially Nebraska, who's a pretty solid team in their own right, and has a good chance to be in the NCAA tournament as well. Those are 2 games that might be the ones that the tournament committee looks back and be like, all right, this team can play well on the road. Those are really important ones that really did boost their resume in this back half of the season.
Absolutely. Well, Owen, we look forward to keeping track of this as we go down the stretch here for Hawkeye women. Let's take a quick break, and thank you again for agreeing to join us for the whole show today. We'll come back and talk Hawkeye men's basketball, and after that, going into the third and final segment, we'll be talking your interview you did with Cooper DeJean previous to the Super Bowl, which will be fantastic just during that Super Bowl week. So leading up to the big game. So can't wait to talk to you about both those things. We'll be back with more of Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara, and he's Owen Siebring, CBS 2 and Fox 28 sports anchor. Back with more in just a few moments.
Hawkeye is brought to you by BettorEdge, your ultimate social betting marketplace. With no VIG, you're bound to win more on every bet on BettorEdge. Founded by Hawkeye alum James Siles and proud Iowan Greg Kieski, BettorEdge delivers an unmatched betting experience. Plus, what's not to love when they're committed to supporting charities and children's hospitals near you? Join the action now. Sign up at bettoredge.com/Hawkeye and get $10 to start winning more today. Better Edge, where your social betting means your bets go further and you win more.
Welcome back to Hawkeyed with me, Dave O'Hara. Momentarily, you'll see our good buddy Owen Siebring, who's kind enough to join us for the whole show today. Owen, of course, and I talked in the first segment about the Iowa Hawkeye women's. Now we'll talk about the men. And Owen, I said this last week, and I'm going to say it again, unfortunately. Two teams going in opposite directions. And man, this Hawkeye men's team, that's about all you can do, as you just did off camera, is just kind of smirk and shake your head and go, what are we going to do here? Injuries aplenty. Hopefully, Riley Mulvey and Drew Thelwell will be back. Again, we record this on Tuesday afternoon, February 18th. So tomorrow night, Oregon at Carver Hawkeye Arena, formerly ranked in the top 25 Oregon. So no slouch at all. Hawkeyes are going to need every able body. Of course, we know Owen Freeman, unfortunately, and Cooper Koch, unfortunately, out for the year. So hopefully, if they get Thelwell and Mulvey back, then you've got a somewhat full rotation. Some guys have played well off the bench. I think of Price Sanford, number one, but Josh Dix until recently, last game, tough game for him. And then, of course, you've got, Peyton Sanford doing the usual. Those guys we're needing, the Hawkeyes are needing 20 plus a game from those guys. Then, of course, Price is chipping in with 10 or 12, Price Sanford and Brock Harding. You've got guys chipping in, Owen, is what I'm trying to draw to. Seydou Traore as well. And, Laje Dembele has a good game. So nice victory against Rutgers, but then the bottom kind of dropped out. We've talked the previous games before, so let's move forward into what's upcoming as we get ready to close out the season. Handful of games left, but Oregon first. But this last game, Owen, you just kind of shake your head and go, oh, it might have been, because to come out that listless and lifeless after halftime, wow, they got manhandled.
Yeah, just didn't expect to see that after they beat Rutgers and they were up at halftime. You thought, all right, is Iowa Hawkeye basketball starting to turn things around? Maybe they're starting to turn the corner and go in the right direction. And that just did not happen in the second half. Got outscored by 30 over the final 20 minutes. Just, again, another loss that you previously might say it's an uncharacteristic type of second half performance, but it sure is starting to look a lot more characteristic of this team this year. This is what we kind of have come to expect out of them. And it's like the defense just isn't there. And it's similar to the football team, where we talked all year about the tale of two halves, and that's exactly what we got out of the Hawkeye basketball team now. And granted, the injuries and the losses this year have hurt them, especially when we're talking about Owen Freeman and Drew Thelwell. But the other guys just have not quite been able to fill in like you'd want them to. I mean, you do get individual single game performances that are good here and there from Peyton Sanford, from Josh Dix, but still, there's some games where they're just not quite showing up. Josh Dix only had 5 points the other day. There were a few games ago that he had 0 points. It's like you just never know quite what to expect out of these guys. And so until they can start to find a little bit more consistency through that entire lineup, no matter who is starting, this is a team that might not even be able to make the Big Ten tournament.
That's the thing I think that's most troubling, Owen, is we talk about consistency or lack thereof for the women at times, but at least they're hanging around. Men's games, man, you look at what happened against Purdue. They're tied at halftime. Of course, you expect Purdue, top 10 ranked team, and Braden Smith to maybe do what they did. But to come out at halftime like that, you and I have talked about this often, and I talk about this on this show regularly. You have got to come out as a team in the opening part of the game and the opening part of after halftime and the opening part of the second half. Otherwise, you're going to get worked. And that has happened recently the last couple of games. And again, two very top 20, top 25 ranked teams from Purdue and Maryland. But still, you got to put up a tougher fight than that, Owen.
Yeah, and we just have not been seeing that. There are times where they look like they fight. You saw Coach McCaffrey was emotional after the Rutgers win just because he hears some of the criticism that he and his team have been getting this year. And so for him to see that kind of fight out of his guys against a solid Rutgers team on the road, I think meant a lot to him. And we just want to see a little bit more of that now. They've got to find a way to channel what they had against Rutgers and find those pieces and make them come together a little bit more frequently, just because we haven't seen that. And right now, as I was looking at the Big Ten standings, they've got 4 teams behind them. So they're 5th from the bottom. Of course, the bottom 3 teams in the Big Ten standings do not make the conference tournament. Looking ahead they've got 6 games left in the regular season. I think there's only one in which they are favored right now. I believe that's the Washington game, which is coming up next week, I think.
Yep.
And so, they are in serious danger of not making the conference tournament right now. They got a pretty good shot, I would say, to make it, as long as they can just string together 1 or 2 more wins in the regular season. But you just don't know if that's a possibility. They've got some good teams that they're going to be playing coming up. And so it's hard to imagine them winning more than maybe 2 games left in the regular season.
You bring up a great point with these upcoming games. Again, Oregon was ranked at one time earlier this year. Washington was not, but then they play Illinois when we record again next Tuesday or Wednesday. So they play, tomorrow night, Wednesday against Oregon. Again, we record this on Tuesday afternoon, February 18th. And then they play Saturday against Washington. And then they play Illinois next Tuesday, the 25th. And then close out, Northwestern, and then Michigan State, and then Nebraska. So to your point, the goal here, and I can't believe I'm saying this to you, is to your exact point. You cannot finish 16th or below, because 16, 17, and 18 do not make the Big Ten tournament with the expanded 18-team tourney. As we talked about with the women previously, they're in the middle of the pack. The next 3 games are going to be huge as to where they're going to finish, either 8, 9, 7, 8, 9, 10 in the Big Ten standings here. Going into this Big Ten tourney, the Hawks are playing for their mere survival. We can't even talk about NCAA tournament or NIT. They're just trying to get to the big dance of the Big Ten. So that, I think, is the focus, and just try to finish on a strong note and play these games. I'm not into moral victory zone and none of that kind of stuff. And I understand why Fran was emotional. Good effort against 2 great players that'll probably go in the first round of the NBA draft, 2 freshmen in Bailey and Harper, Ron Harper Jr.'s son, and the younger brother to another Harper that was predecessor to him at Rutgers. So 2 great players, and you got to give the Hawks tip your cap to them. But and this season, the end of this season, these last 6 games mean a lot more to the Hawkeyes than we thought it would at the beginning of the season, no doubt.
Yeah, certainly. And if this is a team that, the administration is deciding on potentially some jobs that are going to be here or not, I think that a lot of that might be decided on what happens over the next 6 games. If they do see some fight out of this team, if they feel like they are motivated, if they do want to come out and play for this coach, that might be what ends up determining things. If they come out and give the fans something to cheer for, that might be something special that could keep Fran in his line of work here at the University of Iowa. But if not, then we might be looking at maybe a change in the head of state there with the Hawkeyes by next season.
On both sides, either he makes a decision, they make the decision, or both. And as we know on social media, that's been fodder for a long time this season, for much of the season. So it's a great point. That will play out, and we'll certainly have it covered here for you at Hawkeye. So, Owen, we'll get to a few more positive things, and that's no slight to the Hawkeye men. But when we close out the show for our 3rd and final segment, thank you again for agreeing to join us for the entire show. I want to highlight the fantastic interview you did leading into the Super Bowl with Cooper DeJean, and just a lot of great content there and a great conversation. A kid you've been covering, I can say kid because he's a lot younger than you and me, just turned 22 on Super Bowl Sunday, by the way. But a guy you've covered for many years in high school, at Iowa, and now in the NFL. So really looking forward to talking to you in this upcoming segment. So sit tight, folks. Owen Siebring going to hold over for us and join us for the 3rd and final segment. This is Hawkeye. Of course, Owen, as you know, I am the Hawks podcast host as well as sports anchor on Fox 28 and CBS 2. Sinclair stations, which are kind enough to carry this Hawkeye show throughout the state of Iowa, the 5 stations. And again, DaveO'HaraSports.com. Since we're not doing the sports betting segment this week, be sure to go to DaveO'HaraSports.com or at Dave O'Hara Sports via social media. Listen to the Circa Sports Betting show that I host every Wednesday night on WMT, depending on Hawkeye games. Hawkeye flagship station will carry some men's and women's game. We'll get bumped to Thursday, but usually we're on Wednesday nights, 9:30 to 10 o'clock. If you missed that, always go to DaveO'HaraSports.com. Mike Palm, VP of Operations, and a Dubuque, Iowa native, joins me for that show. And of course, Scott Pritchard, Northeast Iowa native and very successful sports bettor in Vegas, joins us as well. So a lot of great stuff to cover yet on this edition of Hawkeye with Owen Siebring. I'm Dave O'Hara. Back with more in just a few moments.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman from Mershman Seeds. Substitutions cost you money. Why take their seconds when you can have our first choice? Here's Ben Paper to tell you more about Mershman Power Core Enlist corn.
We are way ahead of Big Seed on this one. This corn has 4 different post-herbicide tolerances, multiple modes of action for above-ground pests, and it is some of the highest-yielding corn genetics that are out on the market today.
If you're one of the many that got substituted on your corn hybrid last spring, contact your local Mershman Seeds dealer today and ask them about Power Core Enlist corn. From Mershman Seeds, your friend in the field.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. Again, momentarily, you'll see our buddy Owen Siebring joining us. Owen, kind enough to join us for the whole show today. Owen, let's get to it right away. You're a Fox 28 CBS 2 sports anchor and, of course, host of On the Hawks podcast. Doing extra work today for us, but also it had to be a labor of love for you to sit down. I hate to even use the word labor. For you to sit down with Cooper DeJean, he was kind enough to give you 40-plus minutes, and you said it would have been a longer conversation had you had a different YouTube or Zoom plan. But 40 minutes, and no one, to my knowledge, nationally or locally, regionally, has done that extended of an interview with Cooper. Pretty great stuff. So take us inside that interview, if you would, for us, please.
Yeah, really fortunate to get that. I mean, I wasn't even sure if I had Cooper's number, but I look back to the spring of 2020. I believe it was April, and Cooper had announced that he was going to commit to the University of Iowa. He was still already kind of an undercommitted kid out of high school, even though he'd already proven a lot on the football field. He was still not getting a lot of Power Five offers, and so he announces his commitment to Iowa. I kind of text their athletic director and asked if I can come out and talk to him. He's like, "Yeah, sure. Here you go. Meet him out on the football field." And so I did. I went out and I was the only one to interview him on his commitment day. And then I think I must have exchanged numbers with him back then because I still had it in my
Happy
phone.
accident.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way.
And so I still had his number. And so I texted him and I was like, "Hey, Cooper, it's Owen. If you'd be up for it, I was thinking we could do a Zoom interview." And I think it was a couple days later, he texts back, "Hey, yeah, sure, sounds good. Let's do it." And so, yeah, he was kind enough to do a full 40-minute, which you get on your standard Zoom plan. Excuse me. Get the 40-minute conversation. And so we wrapped it up in that time. But, I was telling my colleagues that it's like, if you would have told me 3 years ago that I did 40-minute conversation with Cooper DeJean, I wouldn't have believed you, just because in high school and early in his college years, boy, that kid was so just nervous on camera. I mean, he even talked about that in the interview. I asked about some of the areas of growth that he's seen in himself, and that was one of the things he pointed out was talking to the media. He was like, "I was so scared of you guys when I was in high school," and you could really see that back then. It's like his answers to any conversation were very, very short, and so yeah, he's just grown a lot in his demeanor, and obviously his on-field play speaks for itself, but in his ability as a person to have a conversation has just grown so much, and so it's a lot of fun to catch up with him and just hear a lot about where else he's grown and just this entire year-long journey that he's been on with the Eagles.
Be very curious for your follow-up interview this spring or summer whenever you catch up with him again, because again, it was leading into his 22nd birthday on Super Bowl Sunday, a pick-6 touchdown against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and all the great celebration and fodder going on, and all his national interviews after the Super Bowl. You nailed it perfectly. He said, he was on the Dan Patrick Show and on Fox Sports Radio national shows and on ESPN, and he said, "I'm not used to this," or he's very buttoned up. So the guy from small town Northwest Iowa, OABC IG High School, walked into the pregame, going into the locker room of the Super Bowl, wearing his Letterman's jacket from high school, and just all the neat things. You see how attached to Northwest Iowa and his hometown and home school he is, a small town kid, and you got to just give him major credit for never forgetting where he came from. Of course, he talked on ESPN about playing at Iowa and the Phil Parker defense being prepared, and all these just the great nuggets he's throwing in. I know he's just a rookie this year, and isn't it amazing, Owen? He waited till the last game of his rookie year, last game of the season, period, and he gets an interception, and it's the pick-6, so a touchdown. And I love what he said, which is, as we all know as Hawkeye fans, when he returned punts and kicks to Iowa, every time I touch the ball, I'm looking to score. First thing he said about that interception, when people said, reporters or interviewers said, "What went through your mind?" He's like, "I was looking towards the end zone." Just the great will he has, Owen, I think really bled out in the interview that really showed out in the interview you had with him.
Yeah, over the last year, he really became a fan favorite in Philadelphia. I talked about and my family and I were on a cruise in the Bahamas or in the Caribbean back in November, and I was on the ship and I saw a guy in a Cooper DeJean Eagles jersey, and I went up, I was like, "Are you a Cooper fan?" He's like, "Oh yeah, we all love Cooper." And I've had a couple other run-ins with Philadelphia people that like just talk so glowingly about Cooper, and it's obviously a fan base it's hard to win over, and so he's done that this year, but with his performance in the Super Bowl and now all of his media exposure he's gotten since then, he's not just a Philly fan favorite. He's starting to be an NFL fan favorite. Like everybody around the league seems to love this kid. There's a lot of respect from him among fellow players, teammates, obviously, and the fan base as a whole. Like, seems like everybody just really is falling in love with this guy.
The awesome thing to what you're saying again is people get to see that Iowa nice, and again, a very buttoned up kid from back in the days when you were talking to him at high school to even now, he's opened up a little bit more, but expecting big things. And a lot of people were like, "Oh wow, he only went early in the second round to Philadelphia." Then we saw a behind the scenes video that was put out by the Eagles of how they maneuvered to get him and moved up. And so, yeah, he fell from the middle of the first round, which is where he was projected, into the early second round, but still pretty heady stuff for a guy that could have come back to Iowa for one more year, but then went to the NFL. So let's never forget that, viewers, is, just turned 22 years old. So what a place to celebrate your 22nd birthday, Owen, by the way. Do you know what you were doing or where you were? I think about that when I was 22, and you're like, I certainly wasn't celebrating my 22nd birthday in New Orleans at the Super Bowl. And just great places to celebrate. New Orleans in the Super Bowl, and a pick six, and winning a Super Bowl title. What a way to celebrate, huh?
And beating the Chiefs and preventing them from a three-peat, like that, it just couldn't get any better. Maybe that was even why fans loved Cooper even more, is because there were so many people in America rooting against the Chiefs to win the three-peat, and Cooper helped prevent that. So he really is America's boy.
Owen, as always, you're a great friend of this show. Great content you provide. I love the work you and Mitch and the whole crew do there at Fox 28 and CBS 2, Sinclair Broadcasting, Iowa's News Now. I thank you so much, and we'll catch up with you in a couple of weeks.
Yep. Thanks, Dave.
Truly my pleasure. For Owen Siebring, I'm Dave O'Hara on Hawkeye. Also, thanks to Greg Kieski and James Siles, my production partners at Better Edge and BetterEdge.com. So for Hawkeye, that's all from me. Thanks to all of you.